Everybody okay this time? Can see? Yeah. Yeah, good. Nice. So support and challenging behaviour in the early years, and this is specifically from a home visitor's perspective. And it's not going to move along. There we go. So looking at, just tantrums themselves. So what exactly are tantrums? A tantrum is simply an outer expression of an inner feeling that has got too much for a young child to manage. There's nothing mysterious about tantrums. We need to start paring it back and looking at tantrums just as they are. A tantrum needs to be seen as a coping mechanism for a child's distress. There's no quick fix for dealing with tantrums. They're a natural and necessary occurrence in a child's life. But it definitely is a coping mechanism. So, even looking at it as a coping mechanism for a child takes that negative slant off it. A tantrum, once it has escalated, is something that a child cannot control. So once escalation, once it's gone into that level, whether it's a tantrum, whether it's a meltdown, it doesn't matter. It's already escalated. So it's something that can't be controlled. We can learn so much about children during a tantrum, but we can also learn an awful lot about ourselves as adult supports, how we respond to tantrums and how parents respond to tantrums and challenging behaviour matters greatly. It matters greatly in the moment, and it matters greatly in the long term. Using tantrums as a platform to help our children and parents strengthen their relationship is the connected way to approach tantrums from a support perspective as a strengths-based practitioner. So the essence of a tantrum is simply a child in a tantrum state has become overwhelmed and they cannot cope. A small child's brain is not yet developed enough to make any other choice of behaviour in that moment of distress other than to have a tantrum. A child in the midst of a tantrum is crying out for the help of an adult who has a more developed brain and emotional intelligence than they have. It's not just a tantrum, it's so much more than what we see. There's so much more going on under the surface. If we as practitioners can reframe a child's challenge of behaviour as possibly developmentally inappropriate expectations, which a lot of children are expected to do things that they're just not capable of doing. The need for autonomy and personal power, which children love. Lack of skills, maybe it's an unmet physical need. Is it an unmet emotional need? Is it a sensory issue? Is it stress, anxiety, or even fear? That's the channel or outlook that will best serve both ourselves as practitioners and the family we support if we look to find the cause. Looking beyond the outward behaviour, look below the surface. Encourage parents to look below the surface with you and move away from only seeing the outward behaviour, which might be the biting or the tantrums or the lashing out, from a negative perspective and the only action that needs addressed or supported. Because yes, the biting and the tantrums and the lashing out for safety reasons needs addressed and it needs immediate action. But it's not the only thing that needs to be fixed or to be supported. How we respond greatly matters. When we're faced with a full-blown tantrum, particularly maybe in a public place, parents feel very overwhelmed and they feel helpless. Or they can think on the other side of the spectrum where they can think, oh, it's just a tantrum, I'm going to ignore it. Neither of these approaches are helpful to your child or to your parent-child relationship, particularly in the early years. We need to respond in a connected way to help our children grow and develop. Co-regulation is key to teaching our children how to self-regulate. We need to match intensity with calmness. We need to match loudness with quiet, rough with gentle. Always try to model what you seek in a dysregulated child. If we meet intensity with intensity, the situation is only going to escalate. So model what it is you would like your child to de-escalate to. Helping them deal with their feelings will create these neural pathways in the brain that aid self-regulation, which over time will help them calm themselves in sticky situations without their help. They can't create neural pathways in the brain without experience of co-regulation. They can't get to self-regulation without co-regulation. So co-regulation needs to come first. We need to help our children when they're in a tantrum state and in a distressed state. We need to also remind parents that responding is not giving in. Responding to tantrums is not the same as giving in. We can offer comfort, soothing, and love without giving in to demands. We can acknowledge their feelings and their disappointment. We can also help them find words for their big emotions. This is where we see the value of tantrums and what we can learn from them and what skills we can help our children learn. Remember, you do not have to inflict fear or punishment in order to teach a child a rule or a limit. You can still keep your boundary in place, but be compassionate to their feelings. Consequences should not inflict fear or punishment either, particularly in the under threes. Natural consequences to behaviour teach children a more organic understanding of boundaries and discipline. But what is the bigger picture? When we're in the moment, it's so much more difficult than just the theory. Knowing how to deal with the tantrum in the moment is only a small part in managing behaviour, and often we as parents focus on what do I do when my child throws a tantrum, what do I do when my child bites, what do I do when he kicks or lashes out. We try to do our best in that moment, but this is not the only key to reducing tantrums. What happens in the parent-child relationship outside of tantrum times is the key to behaviour change. It's the key to how often these challenges occur, and it's also key to how they escalate and become known as challenging behaviours or meltdowns. Because we will have behaviours, that will be trying behaviours, but they're not challenging behaviours. So it's how do we keep them on the de-escalated side? We're always going to have behaviours that need to be dealt with, but we're trying to prevent them from moving into the challenging behaviour or meltdown stage. If we practice a connected and responsive parenting style, challenging behaviours are naturally reduced and our confidence in dealing with tantrums grows. And that comes from our parenting side or from supporting parents from our home visiting side, that that we feel confident in how we can give support. So connected parenting is simply where we choose connection over everything else. We think connection before correction, and connection before perfection. No such thing as perfect parenting, as we know. Where parents are encouraged to protect and cherish the relationship they have with their children before discipline. It is also important to understand that discipline is teaching. Discipline needs to also, be removed from that negative thought of discipline. Discipline is simply teaching. Teaching should be a peaceful process and not fraught with punishment and disconnect for a child in the early years. So connect with your child first and correct your child second. Yes, this is extremely hard to do when a tantrum or a meltdown is very challenging, and it's a skill to be learned and a skill to be practiced by us as home visitors and by us as parents. So what can we do to make it easier? Firstly, we need to change the way we look at challenging behaviour. We need to ask ourselves, when we see a child who is having a tantrum, we need to ask ourselves, is this behaviour attention-seeking behaviour? Or is it connection-seeking behaviour? Do we already see it from a different perspective when we see it as connection rather than attention? Connected parenting sees all behaviour as communication. What is my child trying to communicate to me and why? Once we use our observation skills to really see and understand what is going on for our child, we will start to see messages in their communication and messages in their behaviour that will help us find long-term solutions or coping mechanisms for children. We often talk about solutions and trying to rid ourselves of challenging behaviour, but we forget we have to give our children coping mechanisms going forward, or challenging behaviour will continue to occur. Or at worst, we will have children that are only behaving down to compliance and the fear of discipline, which is neither useful for them or us. So beneath every behaviour is a feeling, and beneath every feeling is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behaviour, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. And I always try to think on that. All behaviour is communication. The solution to challenging behaviour is understanding the source. Dealing only with the outward behaviour, such as the kicking, the biting, or whatever it happens to be, will only result in a short-term fix. So if hitting is the symptom, what is the cause? Finding the cause will offer the long-term solutions for everyone. If you meet the real need, then the tantrums will decrease. Become, an observer of a child's growth, become an observer of their struggles, see through their behaviour, observe and listen deeply, and in turn, we will understand how to manage their behaviour better. Observation is key, watching them, how they play, how they behave, what's their triggers. We also need to encourage parents to regulate their own emotions before attending to their child. When they react instead of responding to their child, they're acting on impulse and often feel remorse and guilt afterwards. And nearly always when we react in the heat of the moment, it's the wrong response. So reacting in the moment creates a tug of war with the child, both pulling in different directions, and it almost always escalates the issue unless there is a fear of punitive punishment. Responding well takes practice, but in turn, it's met with much less resistance from the child with no tug of war. Everyone's a winner when it comes to responsive responding. So how do we practice this with young kids? I like to use the pair because it reminds me in the moment just to pause, to empathize, to acknowledge, and then to reconnect. Before we're trying to deal with the behavior, that we go through the motions of pausing, taking a breath, empathize. Why is my child doing this? Acknowledge it, name it for them. You're very sad, you're very upset, you're very cross. Reconnect with them, wait till they relax, reconnect with them, and then you can deal, value your relationship first and reason with your child later. It's here where our children learn that we value them over their behavior. And, that's something that I suppose we all know. We love our children, we just don't like the behavior, but often children don't understand that deeply enough. So encouraging parents, parents are their children's most important role models. Children learn their regulation techniques from their parents and from their primary caregivers. As practitioners, we need to support parents to look at their own regulation techniques. What are they? What do they look like? What do they look like to a young child? This can be really challenging to explore with parents, but it's really important to do so. Is it behavior that those parents would want their child to model? And if it isn't, well, then it's, it's time that we realize that we are role models for our children, and they are copying, they're learning a lot from our behavior. Outdated parenting advice in the past has come from the form of cry it out, time out, or tantrum it out. These ideas are based on isolation, removal, separation, compliance, all of that to control behavior. They don't work in the long run. They may have very short-term results, but they do not work in the long run. They need to be avoided at all costs, and they have no place in responsive, connected parenting. Never leave a distressed child alone. We must never leave our children to deal with their distress alone. A tantrum always constitutes a distress, whether it began as purposeful or not. This is when they need us most. Ignoring unwanted behavior works for the small stuff, but when your child is in distress, they need you. They need a parent, they need an adult helper. Never ever doubt this need. You're not reinforcing challenging behavior, you're responding to their unmet inner needs. Just think on the iceberg or the volcano, what is going on for your child beneath the surface? Try some time in. Base your how you connect with coming together and togetherness and learning. If possible, sit with your child till the tantrum subsides. You may not have given in to their demands, but you have let your child know that you're always there for them. If your child has hurt a peer or a sibling or needs to be taken out of the situation, it is the job of the parent to stay with them as they escalate and then de-escalate. What goes up must come down is a phrase I use with parents a lot. And this, this helps them get through quite difficult tantrums, because they will regulate, but they will regulate much faster with co-regulation. See the good in tantrums and how much we can all learn. In the moment, be there for your child. Remove all thoughts of, if I reinforce or reward this behavior, it's going to happen again. Remember, responding is not giving in to demands. It's simply offering comfort and soothing and love during a heightened emotional time. Reinforcing the behavior is when we give in to the demand of what they wanted. Remember to be patient. It takes approximately 3 weeks to make or break a habit, and over 2 months to make a new behavior part of our automatic behavioral system. So when parents are trying to make changes, please encourage them to be really patient. 3 weeks, it takes 3 weeks to make any form of a change, but it really takes that 2 months to make it an automatic part of a child's everyday responses. Something I absolutely love is fight, flight, or flock. Before some tantrums occur, or prior to that fight or flight mode occurring, children show signs of flock. This can sometimes be identified as the whining or whinging stage. Words I don't particularly like, but often that's, you know what I mean. If you watch closely, children will flock to you in their initial signs of struggle when they feel unsure, unsafe, or unhappy, but they're not yet out of control. They may cling to you, they may stay close, they may hide behind you, or use their tone of voice to show that you know that they're just not sure, they have some form of discomfort. This is where we need to take note. We need, as home visitors, I think we need to be able to identify this flocking stage for parents as well if they are not aware of it. We need to recognize these times as times of struggle for our children and to be there to help and support them. When our children move close to us, when they seek reassurance, when they cling to us, these are a child's signs of distress that may then lead to a tantrum or a meltdown. This is when we need to intervene and provide signs of safety, signs of love, and signs of protection by simply just being there for them. Do not push your child away or try to convince them that their feelings aren't real. Statements like "don't be silly," "there's no need to cry," or invalidating how they feel only makes a child feel much more unsafe and unsure. We need to attend to their needs so that they can feel confident and secure to move away from their parents safely. So that flocking time is really, you know, it's really, once you start to look out for it, it's really evident. So what can we do to support parents? We need to encourage parents to be there for their children. We need to encourage them to notice and respond to their signals and their needs. We need to encourage them to trust their own judgment. They are the expert on their child. They know them best. Obviously, unless there is a child safety or child protection concern, you know, if there isn't, you know, they are the experts, and we can really encourage them to flourish in their role as parents by handing them over that baton. Know when to seek expert advice. If certain behaviours are of concern, encourage and support parents to seek medical and professional advice. Early intervention is key. Unfortunately, due to long waiting lists, early intervention is really hard to find presently. So we are there as their early intervention support. The earlier we equip children with the skills they need to understand their big feelings, their big emotions, and their behaviours, the more confident and skilled they will become, regardless of their need. So do not try to censor their feelings by putting a lid on them. You know, feelings need to be seen and they need to be heard. Repressed feelings will always come to the surface and often come in more challenging ways. So encouraging parents to help children identify what are they feeling. Are they hurt? Are they upset? Are they jealous, scared, happy, angry, or a combination of feelings? Dealing with a combination of feelings can be so confusing for children. You know, we're always not just dealing with one emotion at each time. Talk about feelings outside of challenging behaviours and in times of relaxation and times unrelated to behaviour. Normalize having feelings, because that's exactly what it is. You know, if we only ever talk about or deal with feelings during a tantrum or a meltdown, you know, feelings are going to continue to be an issue. Do not dismiss children as naughty or manipulative. Remember, find the source, meet the unmet need, and the symptom or the outward behaviour then will start to decrease. It sounds easy, it's not. It takes time and it takes patience. You know, encourage parents to know that they're not the only parents faced with these challenges. Everybody goes through them. Encourage them to verbalise and show their own feelings to their child so that they can learn from them. Again, good modelling. Catch their child being good. We definitely don't do enough of this. We as parents need to give children so much more acknowledgement for ordinary behaviour. It is something that we don't often do and something that they need often. So trying to encourage parents to do that. You know, when there's just typical ordinary behaviour, we forget to reward that and to reinforce it. For the very young babies and toddlers, encouraging parents to create an environment when no and stop are not needed often. So when these directions are needed, they're listened to and they're understood. So, you know, provide them with a rich environment to explore and develop safely, where they're not bombarded with constant negative commands of and no and stop. You know, when we constantly give demands like that, there's a time where they will just stop listening. So for the younger children, we need to have an environment that they can explore and be motivated and curious in a safe way. The essence of connected parenting is quality time together. 20 to 30 minutes quality time together is far superior to endless daily hours of disconnected time. Encourage parents to keep their promises to their children, play together, enter their world, be interested in their world. Surface play is very, very quickly seen by children. They see our lack of connection and our disinterest. They know. Play when we're available to play. You know, a child sees the difference. And this is where attention-seeking behavior can appear. That is really just connection-seeking behavior. So practice planned ignoring for the small stuff. Encourage the negative and reward the positive. Work to treat for behaviors that are not challenging behaviors. Have stage appropriate expectations for your child. Remember, children are not many adults. They're not equipped to understand and think like us. So be mindful of our expectations, and be mindful of ask parents, of their expectations, and look at the situation around challenging behaviors and maybe reduce the expectation to the level of the stage that the child is at. Prepare in advance for challenging situations, particularly for children with additional needs. We know how important that is. Don't put your child into situations that may be a struggle for them without planning in advance and being mindful of that flocking behaviour. Always look out for the flocking behaviour. Always find something positive in your child's day-to-day behaviour and highlight it, no matter how difficult the day was. And try to, remind parents that it takes 5 positive interactions to neutralise a negative one. So, we need to have more instances of positive feedback. Promote a sense of belonging by using the word we rather than you. Parents and children are a team. So instead of you need to brush your teeth or tidy up, use we need to brush your teeth and we need to tidy away our stuff. Using the word we becomes less of a direction and a command and an instruction to a child. It's a joint effort, and it's a simple word, but it makes such a difference. Never play out a tantrum in front of a crowd. Shame serves absolutely no purpose and will damage trust in your parent-child relationship. Allowing a child to be in distress in front of others is so detrimental for every realm of a child's development. And it is, it's something that needs to be addressed with parents if this is something that occurs. I am telling granny or daddy or the policeman that needs to be stamped out completely as a go-to threat for children. Shame, guilt and fear will only serve to cause deeper unmet needs, which in turn, vicious circle, results in more challenging behaviour, because you'll get more challenging behaviour from shame, guilt and fear than you will out of small behaviours that you're going to tell granny or daddy or the police on. Becoming aware of children's triggers as a parent. Do they act, respond or react differently in different settings or towards different types of behaviour? This can be really confusing for children, and this is something that also needs to be explored by parents. Knowing our triggers can have an impact on challenges within our relationship with our child. So, do we allow some behaviours in some settings and not in the other? We've got to really have those discussions with parents. Know our own limits as a parent. You can't give 100% all the time, and you cannot tackle everything at once. We have to prioritise. Help parents, make a plan. If there's 3 particular things that are challenging, let's deal with the one that's the priority first and see where we go. Often, if you deal with one, it's the same underlying source, so you don't have to deal with the other 2. Have realistic expectations. Tantrums happen and they are valuable for growth. Don't expect your child not to push their boundaries. It's something we absolutely want our children to do. Children have to learn to push their boundaries so that they can learn and understand boundaries as they grow. So, impart that information to parents. It makes everything seem much more typical for them. Children crave some control, independence and attention, and this can sometimes manifest itself in unwanted behaviours. The only way to solve this is to provide control, independence and attention in an appropriate way. Stopping it and not allowing children to have those things will only make it worse. Control for children is a good thing as long as it's appropriate. So offer opportunities where it's okay for your child to feel in control, independent and attended to. It's fine to allow children control as long as it's appropriate. We may have rewarded children in the past, maybe for unwanted behaviour without meaning to. So then they expect it again. So we see that automatically as being difficult, but it's definitely not being difficult. It's been very, very clever because they have learned from their past experience. Do not try to reason with the child that's in a dysregulated tantrum state. They're impossible to reach. Connect first with them to regulate and deal with reasoning and talking about what happened and making sense of all of that when they're able to listen to you. That's the 3 R's, respond first, regulate second, and reason third. And, you do, I've done it myself, you often fall foul to the, whilst the child is in the tantrum state and you're trying to explain and you're trying to also give out and you're trying to talk about the boundary. The child is dysregulated, they can't hear you. Respond to them first, stay with them, get through their tantrum, regulate their emotions through co-regulation, then their self-regulation. And then when they're ready to listen to you, reason about the situation that just happened. Sometimes parents are not clear and precise enough for children with their information. Ask them to use appropriate and easy language for a child to understand. Put yourself in their shoes. Would they fully understand what has just been asked? Often we use long-winded instructions and sentences, and that's not engaging for a child. Engaging feelings works outside of challenging times. So children are learning about their feelings when they're regulated and when they're able to listen. Regular routines and expectations at home and throughout a child's day have positive impacts on behaviour. Routine is fabulous. When they know what to expect, they feel safe. Feeling unsafe and unsure is probably one of the most traumatic unmet needs for a child in the early years. So thinking about consistency and flexibility. Just when we thought we had it all kind of figured out, and the approach of being consistent but flexible is something that parents need to be supported with, and this can often be a difficult skill to learn and to model. And I think as home visitors, we need to have a clear understanding of what consistent and flexible parenting is. Consistency is needed in the big areas of a child's life, such as love, warmth, food, sleep, and play. But the other smaller stuff needs flexibility. Parents need to be able to trust their own judgment as a parent. You know your child's best. You know your child best. What is best in that moment? And I use the palm tree for this because it reminds me about flexibility and how important. We spoke about flexible thinking in the early session, in the play session, and children need to be flexible. So learn from past experiences with your child. Is this the right thing to be? Should I be flexible here, or should I stay consistent? Don't sweat the small stuff. We need our children to be flexible at times, so it's important we show flexibility as well. Life demands flexibility, and children need to be comfortable with change and spontaneity where possible. We have lots of children that are petrified of change, that need very rigid, consistent routine to be able to function, and that doesn't help their growth and development. So parenting flexibly is like the palm tree. The palm tree survives the storm because it bends in the wind. So it's a nice way to remember it. And don't lose your funny bone. So as practitioners, it's important to encourage self-care for parents and the importance of maintaining a sense of humour. Laugh together with their children, forgive and forget, reconnect and move on. That reconnection is so important. We are much better practitioners, we're much better parents, we're much better people when we look after ourselves. So, don't always put yourself last, because what happens when we put ourselves last, then our challenging behaviours escalate. And again, that has a knock-on effect for our children. So finally, children love to test limits. It's normal and it's natural. The roller coaster phenomenon, I always have difficulty with that word. It's a lovely reminder of testing limits and how important it is. When we sit on a roller coaster and the attendant closes the safety bar in front of us, most of us will test that bar to see if he closed it properly and that it's still secure so that it doesn't give way. We are testing the bar, but we don't want it to give way, because then we won't feel safe. And this is exactly how our children feel about boundaries. They test us because they know we will always be there to protect them and we won't give way. And you know, it's not a bad thing that children test boundaries. It's a clever thing. They're testing and testing, and that's good. So we're doing something right. So see behavior differently to see different behavior. And if in doubt, add food, water, love, play, warmth, sleep, and the very important one of connection. So I have a wee recap. I'm not going to go through it all, but I'm going to pick out the most important ones. We have a few minutes left. Just to remember, all behavior is communication. Respond, don't react. Connection before correction. Co-regulation before self-regulation. Responding is not giving in. Always go to a child that is in distress. Rephrase attention seeking as connection seeking. Find the source, don't focus on the symptom. Always remember that the source is an unmet need. Those are the bigger reasons. Those are the bigger things. Those are the things we need to focus on. Pair, pause, empathize, acknowledge, and reconnect. Look out for the flocking. 5 positive interactions to neutralize a negative one. Remember to be present when we play with young children. Know our triggers and our limits, and know our children's triggers and our limits. And when we are struggling with children testing our boundaries, to remember the roller coaster and also the pantry. So thank you very much, folks. We have a good few minutes to spare.